Welcome back to Good Morning Kenya. We're going to take a look at what's in the headlines, starting with the Star. Kenya is among the high-risk countries put on high alert as World Health Organization declares an outbreak of the Marburg virus disease in West Africa. Marburg, in the same family as Ebola, is a highly infectious and often fatal hemorrhagic fever. So far, it has killed 2 people in Ghana who are said to be unrelated. Contacts are being traced. About 100 people, relatives and caregivers, have been isolated. More on that later on. Still on the Star. Top presidential candidates, Deputy President William Ruto and Azimio's Raila Odinga, are not resting easy 18 days to the election. Analysts have warned that unless the candidates push for massive voter turnout in their strongholds, there might be a runoff. Nearly all polls conducted in recent weeks by credible firms have projected an average voter turnout of 70%. So more on that later on. It's among the stories we were talking about earlier with regard to, also the percentage of undecided voters. So we'll have a conversation about that later on to see where people lie in terms of the voter registration, voter turnout, and of course, the percentages of both the Azimio leader and the deputy president. Now, still on the Star, the prosecution in Monica Kimani's murder case yesterday closed its case after nearly 4 years of trial. Parties will now make submissions to court before the judge determines whether Joseph Irongo, Elias Joey, and Jackie Maribe have a case to answer for the murder of Monica. The prosecution has called for a total of 36 witnesses in a bid to show how the two are guilty of the offenses. More on that later on. Still on the Star, last but not least, Director of Public Prosecution Nudin Haji on Wednesday ramped up preparations for his department for the general elections by launching a 2-day training of 150 prosecutors and investigators. The multi-sectoral training converges players in the security sector, NCIS, IEBC, Witness Protection Agency, and human rights activists. The training is set to sensitize the prosecutors on election offenses and how to preserve the evidence. The training will also feature a simulation of results transmission by the Electoral Commission so that the prosecutors can get sensitized on the key areas to look for in the electoral offences cases. More on that later on. Let's take a look at more dailies with Jane.
All right, let me run you through the front page of the Daily Nation before we get to look at the other stories that have been captured here. Starting with the story here on the header, KNUT demands 60% pay rise for teachers. And that's just one of the demands that they had laid out. That other demands include that 60% pay rise. They want a review of the 2021-2025 CBA that was agreed upon. Promotion of teachers who have acquired higher qualifications. They also want a 4.5 billion teacher professional development program to be put in place, among many others that I will be giving you in just a bit. But moving away from that, coming to the main read on the front page of the Daily Nation today, Raila vows to repossess Ruto land. Now, this goes back to a month or so, where this particular back and forth in regards to this 2,500 acres that the deputy president owns in Taita Taveta was brought to the surface by the Azimio team with questions around its ownership and how the deputy president acquired this piece of land. So now they have taken up the matter with the Ministry of Lands. That story has been captured here on page 7, and the Azimio team now wants the Lands Cabinet, Farida Karone, to repossess this particular, the status quo of this particular land and its document, pending the formation of a commission of inquiry to investigate as soon as the former premier becomes president. That is what they said. So they want the CS to hold on to the documents, and once he assumes presidency, should he be selected or rather emerge the winner in the August 9th elections, then they will establish a commission of inquiry to look into this particular situation on the status of the ownership and acquisition of this piece of land. And finally, Uhuru to his deputy, keep politics away from Unga. Kenyatta laments over the politicization of the cost of living, and especially so looking at the the rising cost of Unga, and he did actually point out to the pattern that has been, especially when it comes to the rise of maize flour. As we approach elections, going back to 2013, the price of a 2 kg packet of Unga shot up from 70 shillings to 130 on average. Same thing happened in 2017. The price of Unga, just 2 months to the general elections, it shot up, and here we are again, less than a month to the general elections, and the price of Unga rose from 100 to an average of 230 Kenya shillings. And he did actually put out the question, is it a coincidence or in regards to the market dynamics, or is it a deliberate outcome of Unga crisis just before the elections? So that story is here. You can also get to read more of it. Those are just basically the stories that have been featured here on the front page. Doreen, what does the PD have for us today?
Right. Let me just pick it up from that politics of Unga, seeing that, you know, it falls within what is the basic commodity of Kenyans. And right now, as we've kept talking about, is that the cost of living has been on an upward trend for some time now. And just as you rightly put it, Jane, in respect to what we have been treated to so far, particularly in the last two elections, that is 2013 and 2017, where we've seen the same play out. And even just as history has it, in 2017 is actually just on the run-up to election, in fact, a few months to then, is when we had the highest price of Unga retailing at 189 up until 2017. After that, price shot up from around 100 bob to that amount, and then we saw that just coming down a few weeks to election, the same way we are seeing right now. This has clearly created a fodder with the Kenya Kwanza team. In fact, a good number of them terming it as a very big joke. And the question still lies on why is this coming out now? But also, what we wait to see is if at all these prices are going to go down immediately, just as the president announced yesterday, because as we had it, it was first announced on Monday by the CS, but that didn't happen. So we wait to see if at all things will change. But also the bigger question still remains is what really happens after this election, or a few weeks after the election, because the prices might just go back to how it were. So really, is the government going to come up with a sort of permanent solution to salvage this problems and sort out these issues that Kenyans really face that pertains the high cost of living? Still remains a wait-and-see kind of situation. Away from that to elections right now, and as it turns out, hundreds of nomination hopefuls are now keeping their fingers crossed as a 7-day deadline that had been set by IEBC for political parties to submit new list now lapses tomorrow. This is in respect to the 79 political parties that submitted the list of nominated leaders. This is those that are supposed to, you know, get the nominated MCAs, nominated MPs, as well as senators. IEBC faulted this political party, citing that they did not adhere to the rules and regulation, given the fact that these seats are set aside for the marginalized persons, the youth, as well as the PWDs. But as we have it over time, is that we see oftentimes political parties awarding loyalists, those that have failed in the nomination, by giving them the nominations for various positions. But this is now what IEBC is just trying to curb, and this is also why they have sent them back to the drawing board. And lastly, having Kigame on the ballot will cost taxpayers 971 million, close to 1 billion Kenyan shillings, with just 18 days to the polls. Will IEBC bow down, seeing that High Court had actually ruled that it's important for IEBC to include Kigame's name, seeing that they had locked him out on bases that were not lawful, particularly when they had asked him to present the 48,000 signatures, which, as High Court termed it, it was unconstitutional. Remember that in our country, we always hold elections every second Tuesday of the month of August after 5 years, and this is why this year's elections falls on the 9th. So also IEBC has it that if at all his name is going to be included on the ballot, this also means that we might just need to postpone the elections. Are we ready for that? Is IEBC ready for that? Seeing also that IEBC has already begun printing ballot papers. How is it going to pan out? Regina.
I want to pick it up from the issue of Unga. We all know ugali is our main dish. If it goes, the prices go up, we all feel the pinch. And I tend to think that's why we had the president address that particular issue. And he also, if you listen to the speech, he also went further to detail that this is something, it's an occurrence that has always been happening in a cyclic manner, especially ahead of the elections. But what is the backstory of that? Regarding with that particular announcement where a 2 kg pack of maize flour should start retailing at 100 shillings, we will be doing a spot check as KBC Channel 1 Business Desk to find out if this has been effected at a time when millers have a different opinion. And this is what they had to say, and I want to quote Rachel Miami, who is a Ram Millers Limited director. It says, it is difficult for small-scale farmers to meet the new conditions set by the government within short timelines. Most of us have been out of operations for some time now. That is what Rachel Miami of Ram Millers Limited director had to say. Also, there is a claim by small-scale millers that say that the state has locked them out of the subsidy scheme. Remember, government is going to be subsidizing this particular maize at least for 105 shillings there, so that this can actually come down. So now traders yesterday said it would be expensive for them to invest in the new requirements that will be enforced for only 28 days. Remember, this is just a mitigation measure that is not for a lifetime or even for 6 months or so, but just 28 days to go. Now, the maize shortage has seen some traders buying the cereal from far away as Zambia and Malawi, and this has pushed the price over 2 kilogram tin, if you like, Gorogoro, yeah, to between 230 shillings to 250 shillings in part of the North Rift. Now, some farmers actually in Uasin Gishu, and one is quoted here. Thomas Bowen says that the government should ensure adequate maize reserves by buying farmers' produce immediately after harvest, pointing to the issue of post-harvest losses, also playing a role in the issue of the maize shortage. Remember, this has been going on for a while now, and we are waiting to see if indeed it's going to take in effect. And we are opening our communication channels to you. Since the announcement yesterday, have you gone shopping for maize flour? If you have, has the price come down to 100 shillings? If it hasn't, well, let us know. If it has, please also let us know, because this was a presidential directive that was to take effect immediately. But now millers are saying it is going to be quite difficult to effect this in the 28 days that it's supposed to be in effect. And you know, matters of Unga are close to our hearts, given that, you know, it's a staple food, and we're also talking about and grappling with the high cost of living. So that's the big read in this particular daily that has also gone further to highlight the teachers' push for a 60% pay increase. And the lowest teacher will get an increment of around 14,550 shillings, while the highest paid teacher is going to get an increment of 89,016 shillings if the new push by KNUT for a salary review is approved by the TAC. With 18 days to go to the polls, the question is, will Ruben Kigame, after getting that reprieve, you know, to participate in the upcoming elections, will he make it to the ballot? Why am I asking this question? Is that it will cost him 971 million shillings to be on the ballot. Now, the IEBC says it may be forced to postpone the election if it has to include musician and presidential candidate Ruben Kigame on the presidential ballot. The good question that my colleague has asked, are we ready for the postponement of the elections at this point? We're doing 18 days to go. Is it something that we can actually see happen and still remain calm?
You know, Regina, we were the first African countries to have the elections annulled. So, postponement of an election, probability?
Close to none?
Not close to none. You would be surprised. You would be surprised. To your chair 50-50.
Wacha tuone. Now, as we're waiting to see, is that now the IMF says that National Treasury is to scrap the fuel subsidy in the next 2 months. Why? The issue of sustainability and it being a costly affair. Let me take you back to 1 week or 2 weeks back when the government had to intervene when we had the fuel review, and through an executive order, a further, let me see, was it 226 point something billion shillings was added to ensure that the review doesn't go upwards for this month that you're talking about, July 14th all the way to August 14th. This is to continue cushioning Kenyans from the high cost of living because of the ripple effect that fuel would have on cost of transportation, cost of production, to just name but a few. But now IMF says in a report, says that retaining the subsidy would continue to be a costly affair for the government, which would spend 118 billion shillings in the current financial year. And this is more than what it had planned to spend. Now, the subsidy has cushioned Kenyans from high pump prices since April last year, with the government having so far spent 1 billion shillings. Now, previously, Treasury had said that the subsidy was unsustainable and that it has risen to 13 billion in June this year, and this was way above the 2 billion a month that it collects through the Petroleum Development Levy. So yes, now IMF says in 3 months this will not be sustainable. Treasury had already said it's not sustainable. So what options do Kenyans have? But remember, when it comes to matters of the globe and the issue of fuel, Kenya is not alone in this situation. Look at the price changes in the United States as well as Egypt, such. So it's a global issue, especially when it comes to the OPEC producers who they have seen some critics coming to say that the production is quite low at this point. Maybe, I don't know, they're wanting to twist the arm of the nation. And also the Ukraine-Russia war also has a basis for where we find ourselves as a globe. But now for the Kenyan situation, we might be forced to tighten that belt a little bit further to survive. It's already tight. I'm worried we're having a waspy.
Regina, just from a business standing, maybe you can explain to us further. I mean, and you said in our Kenyan context, seeing that we've also had quite a lot of conversations surrounding the fact that we have quite a number of levies attached to the fuel, the road maintenance levy, railway, fuel development levy, or the taxes, so to speak. If we remove these taxes and reduce them to even about 2 or 3, because you have over, I think, 9, could this at least make us be in a better place? Could at least this salvage the situation?
Well, but is that possible?
Good question, Jane, because government has to generate money
revenue,
to take care of its development agenda and also keep the wheel of the government churning. The only way that government can raise this money, remember, government does not do business, yes, or in essence shouldn't do business. So government has to raise this requisite money through taxation and levies, so to speak. And I'd also want to challenge each one of you who is watching, and even my colleagues here. Have you checked the cost of your tokens? Have you noticed an anomaly? Is it what you expected? Like, for example, let's give a figure. If you buy tokens worth 1,000 shillings right now, give or take, you're going to get around 62 units, right?
Yeah.
Around 62 units. So now when you get your tokens, I'd want you to just go through the other charges that have been effected into your 1,000 bob. You will see several stuff, including the foreign, I think the exchange something, foreign something, you'll see at around 211, thereabout. So you'll see numerous charges that have been put into your 1,000 bob that cuts down to the value of why that's why you're getting 62 units and not the previously 90 or 88 units worth of 1,000 bob of tokens. If I'm not too wrong, I'm not too sure, but kindly check. And this is where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, because government had promised that Kenyans, that the cost of energy, the cost of power was to come down. And this is where then the fuel issue comes in, you know, and government continuing to raise the requisite monies that it requires to see the wheel of government continue churning. We have runaway inflation that has been pegged at around 12%. That's around May, thereabout. And it's not easy. We're talking about the uncertainty between Russia and Ukraine and the disruption of the global supply chain. And there's certainty around that. We're also looking at the oil production from a global perspective. We do not have our own oil. Independent power producers were to get into an agreement with government to ensure that the cost of power comes down. But that, we are yet to get feedback on what went wrong. So when we say Kenyans, we need to tighten our belts further, it exactly means that.
You know, Regina, this is no longer a belt. It's a corset. You're wearing corsets. The ribbed ones. Still.
But I also tend to think we need to come up with other means to actually survive.
Alternatives?
Alternatives. Like, if you do not need to actually be using your car every day, carpool. Carpool. You know, let's get another way of actually surviving. And one of the things I learned is that Kenyans are also surviving in a unique way. Now, Kenyans have moved away from shopping at the supermarket, and they're doing kiosks within the estate, or even wholesale shops, which are a bit cheaper. Someone actually told me they cannot remember the last time they took a packet of milk, but they discovered powdered milk, where you just do a teaspoon and you're good to go. Huh?
Alternatives it is.
We need to tuamiane hizo siri za kusurvive being a Kenyan.
If the tokens are too expensive, get solar power.
No. Actually, solar is, okay.
Solar is an investment.
And let me take this with a pinch of salt. Solar is an investment, yes, in the long run with the tropics, but it is not cheap.
It's quite expensive.
It is not cheap. Zima stima kama hauko kwa room. Please, don't leave the lights on.
Watu watapenda mishumaa.
Something like that. Yeah, try doing those candlelit dinners if you can. Anyway, we take a quick breather. We'll be right back with more. Remember, this is Entertainment Thursday, and we are open to your feedback. You can get us on Twitter at KBC Channel 1. My Twitter handle is @RayManyara.